The
Sean
internal
Diddy
personnel
Combs is
database
facing
of
more
the Atlanta
explosive
Federal
allegations
Detention
in a
Center
bombshell
updated its
lawsuit,
weekly
this
roster.
one filed by his
Under the
reportedly
category
former
Special
executive
Personnel
assistant,
Code
who
Adjustment,
claims he was
the
coerced
name
into
of
setting
Warden
up drug
TD
fuel
was
parties
marked as
and
removed
even
from system
performing
by
degrading
administrative
acts to
order.
prove his
There
loyalty
was
to
no
the music
decision number
mogul.
recorded.
We're going to break
It was
down these latest
deactivated.
shocking details
Her
of
personal
alleged
contact
sexual
information
coercion, abuse, and
disappeared from the
manipulation,
internal
and
network
how this
exactly
adds to the
36
mounting legal
hours
troubles
after
for
she
Sean
filed
Diddy
her
Combs.
complaint. The
Welcome to
changelog was
Sidebar,
executed
presented
from the
by
system's
Law&Crime.
highest
I'm
access
Jesse
level
Weber.
server,
Well,
a
it is
device
another
bearing
day,
the
and it is
identifier
another Diddy lawsuit.
DCPC-A1,
Yep, this
located
time
in the
from a man
coordination
who
office
says
on
he
the
was the
fourth
former
floor of the
executive
Security
assistant of the
Administration Wing.
disgraced rapper and music
Only
producer,
two
and he's
individuals possess
accusing
the
Diddy of
authority to
essentially
perform a
sexual
system-level
coercion
personnel
abuse,
removal at that
battery,
tier,
sex
the
trafficking,
head of
intentional
Federal Human
infliction of
Resources
emotional
and
distress,
Detention
and it
Center.
all stems, he says,
No
from what
confirmation
happened at these
exists
lavish
a was
drug-fueled
made.
nights called Wild
The removal
King
of
Nights.
Warden TD's
So,
name was not
this
accompanied by any
32-page lawsuit,
or
which
protective
was reviewed by
reassignment.
multiple outlets
At
including Rolling
11:20
Stone,
a.m., a
was
printed
apparently
copy of
filed
the
in Los
personnel
Angeles by
deployment
a
chart
man
was
named
generated
Phillip
in
Pines, who
preparation
says
for
he
the
worked
new
for
week's
Diddy
schedule.
from 2019
Under
to
the section
2021.
marked Internal
So,
Alert,
actually more
TD's
recent
name
than some other suits we've seen against Shaw Combs have been in the early 2000s or even the 90s. But according to reporting in the suit, Pines is alleging a few different things here now before we even get into it, and there is a lot to get into. You might be wondering, what the heck does that name mean? What are we talking about when we said, while Knights? Well, part of this lawsuit alleges that Pines had to prove his loyalty to Shaw Combs, who was dubbed the king by performing sex acts for him, hence the name Wild King Nights. The suit even reportedly says that Pines was treated, quote, like an animal playing fetch in order to prove his loyalty. And by the way, that is just one of the many disturbing details in this lawsuit. So to help me break it down, I want to bring on friend of the show, defense attorney Mauricio Padilla, who has been our go-to as we've been covering the Shaw Combs saga. Mauricio, so good to see you. Thanks so much. Happy holidays. Before we get into thank you. Before we get into the specifics here, I feel like we're almost becoming numb to the lawsuit. After the lawsuit, and do all of the allegations against Combs so far that we've seen make the claims here. These new claims, do you think it makes it more or less true? In other words, does the fact that a lawsuit comes out in late 2024 as opposed to maybe at the beginning of the year, right after he was arrested, but on the heels of all the allegations so far, how should we all be thinking about yet another lawsuit against Sean Combs' suit? I think little by little it's chipping away at whatever he's got left as far as reputation-wise. I think when I read it, the biggest key factor for me is that we're talking about somebody that was under his employee. If that allegation is true, if this was actually somebody that was employed by him from 2019 to 2021, he's got a problem on his hands, because this, not just a Jane Doe or John Doe or a random person. This is someone that was, in his circle under his employee. So the allegations are serious, and as we've seen, could be foreshadowing a testimony in the criminal case. When I read this, I can't fathom that the prosecutors aren't going to want to talk to him or include him, especially regarding the allegations of scrubbing his cell phone and other devices for evidence, things of that nature. That when you read it, it really, goes hand in hand with the indictment. I want to get into that, especially the time frame, because let's keep this in mind. Prosecutors have alleged criminal conduct from 2008 to 2024. This would be right in that time frame. So let's everybody keep that in mind. We'll talk more about it, but I have to get into a little bit more of these allegations, starting with what Pines says he was in charge of doing for these parties. What was his job? So one of the things Pines alleges here is that he was responsible for setting up these gatherings, which reportedly involved heavy usage of various illegal drugs and alcohol, sexual paraphernalia. And sometimes it would take place inside of Diddy's bedroom. He says that Diddy instructed him to prepare spaces with these specific items. Quote, Plaffe was instructed by Sean Combs on multiple occasions to ensure his personal bedroom and/or various hotel rooms were set up with red lights, ice buckets, alcohol, marijuana joints, honey packs for male libido, baby oil, Astroglide, towels, illegal drugs, and I'm sorry to say this, power banger sex machines. That's the way it's categorized. Now, if you're unfamiliar, Astroglide is a lubricant, and also on that list, allegedly, was erectile dysfunction, drug called callus, and the morning after pill. So these party supplies, he says, it's kept in a bag called the MVP. According to Rolling Stone, who says it reviewed a copy, The lawsuit Pines says he couldn't just leave the supplies in the hallway and walk away. No, he alleges he had to be let into the room, meaning he ended up seeing what was going on behind closed doors. So to speak, by the something interest here. Something very interesting here I want to talk about is that Pine makes mention of fact that he was exposed to what was allegedly going on inside these rooms. He couldn't just drop the stuff off and leave. If those allegations are true, how does that impact the strength of his claim? The strength of this lawsuit, because allegedly he's a key eyewitness. He's a key eyewitness. And not only that, but he says that he was forced to look at the videos that memorialize these parties and these events when he was scrubbing the videos off of his phone. And he actually says that he was intimidated and threatened that if Sean Combs' family were to ever find the videos or images, that he would never work in the industry again. So not only was he live seeing the actual events that occurred, but he was also referenced to have to look at the videos and images that were, when you have to scrub the phone. I mean, listen, this case is all-encompassing to the point that P. Diddy has successfully vilified baby oil, and if anybody thinks that that's not true, this Valentine show up to your bedroom with a bottle of baby oil and see what your spouse says. Wow, they're not going to like it. What is that? What a year. What a year. One of the things is, I mean, the thing that stuck out to me, you mentioned it before, these allegations are consistent with what the allegations are that are laid up by prosecutors when they describe the freak-offs in their indictment. Right, these sex-fueled parties, these drug-fuel parties, the baby oil, the Astroglide, and it makes me wonder, do you think Mr. Pines is a cooperating witness for government B? If so, do you think he was one of the people that they originally spoke to when they were coming up with this, when they were drafting
and no
the
longer
indictment
has a voice who
coming
will
up with the
pursue
charges?
justice for her
Or do you think
accusation.
he's come out after? Because
As of the
again,
taken against
I think
Diddy,
the timing of the
no
lawsuits
expansion of the
reported at the end of the
investigation,
year.
no
Right
isolation
now,
orders,
talk to me about
no
what
equipment
you
access,
think his role might
no
be.
suspension of
If I
attorney
had to guess,
communication.
I would figure that
Everything
the feds
inside
already
solitary
talked to
block
him.
C
Just
continued as
because I know
before.
from my
Everything
experience
except the fear.
dealing with them,
If a
how
female warden can
all-encompassing
vanish
their
after a single
investigations
no
are.
thing except
And if
the
he
fear.
really was his
If a female warden
executive
can
from the
vanish
time
after a
frame
single
that
note,
they allege in
ones
the
who once
lawsuit,
worked
I can't
overnight
see
in
a
that area,
scenario where they
the ones who
wouldn't- I mean,
filed
they
for leave without
investigate
giving a
regular
reason,
cases to
the
the
ones
point
who
that
saw but
you're-
never
you know,
spoke.
that
No
I'm
one
shocked
mentions
when I
the
see it
note,
as a commercial
but everyone
defense
knows
attorney
it appeared.
with late regular
And if what
people
it
when you're
says is
talking
true,
about
then
high-profile
punishment.
celebrity case
Part 3.
like this,
The
I
person
can't
no
fathom
longer in the
that
system.
no one
The
spoke
internal
to this
personnel
individual
database of the
prior to
Atlanta
this,
Federal
so I would
Detention
think
Center
that-
updated
yeah, I
its
would
weekly
think that they
roster.
did speak to
Under
him,
the
and I
category
can't
Special
imagine
Personnel
that he's
Code
not a
Adjustment,
witness.
the
Because
name
the
of
way that
Warden
they work
TD
is
was
they
marked as
want
removed
everybody
from
that can
system by
cooperate
administrative
theory of the
order.
case to be on
There
their
was no
witnesses.
decision number
Or to
recorded.
be
It
somebody
was
that
deactivated.
they could
Her
call, and I
personal
can't
contact
think that
information
if he
disappeared from
actually
the
was his
internal
assistant
network
for this
exactly
time frame,
36
he
hours
would be an
after she
excellent
filed her
witness for them.
complaint.
See,
The
the
change
problem
log was
is, we don't
executed
know
from
who
the
the
system's
witnesses are in
highest
that
access
criminal
level
case.
server,
Yet I
a
don't know when
device
we're gonna
bearing the
know.
identifier
Maybe closer to trial,
DCCA1,
but you have to
located
imagine
in the
that their
coordination
case is built
office on the
on
4th floor
more
of
than
the
just
Security
testimony of
Administration
one
Wing.
alleged victim.
Only 2
Right,
individuals
victim one.
possess the
In the
authority to
indictment, it has
perform
to
a
be
system-level
more. And even
personnel
if we
removal
assume
at that
victim
tier,
one
the
is
head of
Cassandra
Federal Human
Ventura,
Resources
Cole's
and Detention
ex-girlfriend,
Center.
who filed that
No
initial
confirmation
lawsuit
exists
against
as
him,
was made.
recounted a lot
The
of these
removal of
details
Warden
that are
TD's
consistent
name was
with
not
the
accompanied
indictment,
by any
talking about the
or
freak-offs
protective
and all this.
reassignment.
It has to be more
At
than just
11:20
her.
a.m.,
So when
a
I
printed
hear something
copy of
like
the
this,
personnel
I will tell
deployment
you
chart
out of
was
a lot of the
generated in
lawsuits
preparation
that
for
I've
the new
covered
week's
over the past
schedule.
7 months.
Under the
This is
section
one of
marked
them.
Internal
One of the
Alert,
few
TD's
that
name
I actually think is the most consistent with what prosecutors are charging. Sean Combs with, right, sex trafficking, racketeering, conspiracy, transportation to engage in prostitution. And it just makes me think that this is why he may play such a crucial role. We could be wrong, though. And it also talks about Sean Combs physically attacking Jest, that he KCK somebody in the stomach, that he kicked somebody in the buttocks. So it's really tying together the theory that the prosecution is put out there in their indictment. And yeah, I mean, I believe that he is a witness. I mean, it's really mimicking a lot of the same things that the federal government is saying that Sean Combs was up to during this time period. And because the government says, you know, it was a racketeering conspiracy, it was a criminal enterprise. He had associates of his who would set up these events and also clean up these events. which, by the way, let me get back to this lawsuit. Because Pine says his role didn't just stop at preparing this, he also says he had to clean up these rooms afterwards. And the cleanup is not any less disturbing. According to the lawsuit, PL would remove any evidence of drugs, condoms, sex toys, remove bodily stains, like blood, urine, and fluids from any sheets, furniture, and pack away all the items used during Wild King nights. And all of this cleanup, he says, was also part of a cover-up so that no one would suspect anything was going on. And that alleged cover-up also included leaving very large tips for the housekeeping staff to essentially prevent them from reporting anything, and going even further into the duties of his supposed cleanup. This also extended, as we were talking about, to wiping Diddy's personal devices of any evidence, according to the lawsuit, reviewed by Rolling Stone. PL was further instructed to scrub Shaskholm's personal devices, including but not limited to personal phones, laptops, tablets of any compromising videos. And by the way, unfortunately in doing so, says, he was once again unwillingly exposed to the alleged conduct that was occurring in order to accomplish this unreasonable task. Plaintiff would have to, again, unwillingly see the video and then erase it. Okay, Mauricio, let me ask you this. How does he prove this? How does he prove all this happens? It's just his testimony. Will you try to subpoena those people to come forward? How do you prove something was deleted? Talk to me. Well, first of all, I can only imagine how sloppy Sean Combs was with evidence when he got busted, with those 2 machine guns, or 3 machine guns, with the altered serial numbers. So I really don't trust Sean Combs or the people around him's ability to properly cover up anything. So I envision that you're going to see a trial payments from his ANX for flights, for people straight payments directly from his company to people, and then the time frame is important. Because this happened in hotels, in places that have surveillance, that there's records that could be consistent with his testimony about when he alleges that these parties took place. He probably has his own information about who attended the events. When you're somebody like Sean Combs and you're such a celebrity and you're engaged in this type of behavior, people around you are memorializing it. It's on their own. So I feel like this guy probably was creating his case prior to him even filing this lawsuit back when it was happening. Because when you're, part of this, and if this is true that he's, threatening you with a threat of being fired, with a threat of, being ostracized in the industry, he may have taken steps to memorialize this himself, saying, you know what, I may have to defend myself in the future, and I'm going to start keeping records of what's going on. So I wouldn't doubt it if we see something like that. Does it hurt or help him that I'm talking about Mr. Pines, that he could be seen as an active participant in this, that he was complicit in it? Does it hurt his case? Does it hurt maybe if he takes the stand, testifies against Sean Combs at a criminal trial? I mean, listen, it's a double-edged sword. If it hurts or it helps, yeah, he was complicit. He even admits in his lawsuit that he went as far as to start having sex with this woman when Sean Combs forced him. But then he felt bad. So a lot of people are going to be like, well, you felt bad about it, but you got erection and you started to have sex with her. So how badly did you feel about it? And I'm sure that his lawyers, Sean Combs' lawyers, are going to attack that. Like, yeah, you were a willing participant. You actually had sex with this woman. You penetrated her, and all of a sudden, years later, you want to back out and say, I wasn't a willing participant. I was forced. And I think you're going to see that a lot in the criminal trial as well, where they're going to be like, oh, sudden, Sean Combs flew you to destination, paid you $20,000 to take part in an orgy, gave you drugs you're the victim. You're the victim. You weren't, you didn't want to do it. And I think that we're going to see that a lot, not only from Mr. Pines, but from a lot of the witnesses that are going to come forward in the actual case, where Sean Combs' attorneys are going to be, labeling them as willing participants in something that is not illegal.
present,
problem
and
is,
no
is
longer
that,
has a
you know,
voice who will
as-
pursue
as we've
justice for her
discussed in
accusation.
before, even if you were
As of
doing
the
this
taken
on the
against Diddy,
reticence,
no
since
expansion of the
2008,
investigation,
it's illegal,
no
and it's
isolation
illegal
orders,
to pay
no
somebody
equipment
to cross
access,
state lines
no
to
suspension of
perform
attorney
for the sex
communication.
act. And it's
Everything
illegal,
inside
and it's
solitary
illegal
Block
to
C
cross the
continued as
lines with
before.
drugs to have these
Everything
orgies.
except the
This
fear.
stuff's illegal,
If a female
and
warden
the
can
main
vanish
one of
after
the
a
main
single nothing
underlying
except the
themes
fear.
in the indictment.
If a female
And
warden
you
can
could argue
vanish
here
after a
it's the
single
element
note,
of
ones who
using,
once worked
fraud,
overnight in that
force, or
area,
coercion
the ones who
to
filed
force
for
people
leave
to
without giving a
engage in
reason,
these
the ones who
alleged
saw but never
sex acts.
spoke. No
Because
one
according
mentions the
to
note,
review,
but everyone
by
knows it
Rolling
appeared.
Stone, Pines
And if what
says,
it says
if
is
the
true,
devices
then
going
punishment.
back to the devices,
Part 3.
for example,
The person no longer in the system.
if
The internal
devices
personnel
weren't
database
wiped
of the
clean,
Atlanta
he
Federal
said there would
Detention
be
Center
severe
updated its weekly
consequences.
roster.
Plaintiff was
Under the
asking
category
that if
Special
any of
Personnel
Sean
Code
Cole's
Adjustment,
family
the name of
sees the
Warden
videos,
TD was
either
marked
on
as
the personal
removed from
device
system by
or
administrative
cloud-based
order.
storage,
There was
plea
no
info would
decision
be
number
terminated
recorded.
with
It was
negative comments,
deactivated.
so that
Her
he could
personal
never be in
contact
the
information
entertainment
disappeared
industry.
from the
That's
internal
something you
network
mentioned more
exactly
recent, and I
36
think
hours
that's
after she
interesting, by
filed
the
her
way.
complaint.
On a side
The
note,
change
if
log
that
was
is true,
executed
why
from the
maybe in the
system's
face
highest
of all these
access level
allegations,
server,
his
a device
family has
bearing the
stood by him
identifier
up. So if all this is
DCCA1,
true, it
located
does
in the
make,
coordination
if all this
office
is
on the
true,
4th floor
and
of the
again,
Security
Sean
Administration
Combs
wing.
has not been found guilty.
Only 2
He's not been
individuals
found
possess the
liable
authority
in
to
any of
perform
these
a
lawsuits.
system-level
But if
personnel
all of
removal
this
at
is
that
true,
tier,
it
the
makes
head
me
of
wonder,
Federal Human
did he
Resources
compartmentalize
and
his
Detention
life
Center.
and keep it away from
No
his family?
confirmation
Because they
exists
have
as
been
patient was
backing him.
made.
So
The
let's
removal
start
of
there.
Warden
So
TD's
what
name was not
do you think
accompanied by
about
any
that,
or
Mauricio?
protective reassignment.
Well, I mean, listen, it seems
At
to me from
11:20
the
a.m.,
lawsuit
a
that
printed
I read
copy of the
involving
personnel
his son,
deployment chart
that
was
he really
generated in
wasn't
preparation for the new week's
compartmentalizing
schedule.
anything with his
Under the
son,
section
because
marked
apparently
Internal
his
Alert,
son
TD's
was
name
involved in these parties, at least the one on the super yacht that ended up in a lawsuit. The issue is, I mean, when you're Sean Cole's son and you're twins that and your dad isn't drawing boldly defined lines in what's acceptable and what's not. One can imagine that maybe his son was mimicking his father, committing the same mistakes as his father, and that's a problem, because as we discussed before, the federal government loves superseding indictments, and they love to rope in your family members. That may not be the issue in this case, because they could lose the battle of public opinion. The people may be like, wow, they're going too far in indicting his son, but that's something that I've seen a lot in my career, and I think a lot of criminal defense attorneys have seen. So far, what we've said in the indictment, has Mr. Pines committed a crime? Why do I ask that? You think he has been offered some sort of immunity to testify? Again, assuming he would be a cooperating witness in a criminal case based on these allegations. Has he done something illegal by wiping the devices, by paying off the house staff, by cleaning things up, where he would be offered immunity to testify against Sean Holmes? I mean, maybe theoretically he could be part of this sex trafficking operation, or this racketeering operation. What's your thoughts? Well, listen, anytime that, from what I've read, if they wanted to say that he was part of the conspiracy, they could, because anybody that helps in furtherance of the conspiracy can be roped into it. So if you were handing out drugs, you were scrubbing devices. If you were, picking up sex workers at the airport and bringing them to the hotel,
when the first images from the federal raid on Diddy's $40 million Los Angeles estate were released, no one expected this.
they would offer
Neatly
him
stacked in
immunity
display
because you're
cabinets
right.
like prized
Some of the
possessions
things
were
that he
200
says
bottles of baby
could
oil. Right next to them,
lead to
over 900 bottles
admissions
of lubricant,
guilt and
rows and
wrongdoing
rows. It
in
looked
the
less like
criminal
a home
sense.
and more like
So
a warehouse
I
for
would
something far
envision
more
that
disturbing. These
they
weren't
would
the kind of
offer him
items most
immunity.
people keep in
Interesting.
bulk. But
Now,
for
by the way,
investigators, it
his
painted a chilling picture.
responsibilities,
Why would one of the most powerful men
we
in
talked
hip-hop
about
need this
him
much?
allegedly
And more
setting
importantly,
up and
what
cleaning
exactly
up
were
these,
they used for?
alleged escapades. But
It
that is
started
not
with a
where the
knock,
lawsuit
then a
ends.
battering
Was
ram.
talking
On a
about
quiet morning
before
in
there
March
was another
2024,
harrowing allegation
Homeland Security
of what
agents
could be
stormed Sean
considered
Diddy Combs'
sexual
LA mansion
coercion
in the elite
in a
neighborhood
very
of Palm Hills.
particularly
Not long
graphic
after,
revelation
another team hit his
where
Miami
Pines
property on the
claims that
glitzy Star
Diddy
Island.
allegedly
These
forced
weren't just
him
casual
to
searches,
expose
these were
himself
federal
to a
raids with
female
helicopters
guest
overhead,
at Diddy's
agents demand, to which Pines says he participated out of fear of consequences. And the way he says this played out, according to the lawsuit, began with Diddy allegedly massaging him, forcing him to take a shot of tequila before pushing him into a female gate. And remember how we mentioned that this was what the supposed meaning behind these wild king nights was. Well, it's Rolling Stone who mentions that this appears in this lawsuit, was sexually rubbing the shoulder of the plane of Pines, informing him to show loyalty to the king. And the next part is just graphic, but let me just say, it involved Pines supposedly having sex with this female guest, and then exposing himself to Combs as well. And now after he says he went along with this, because he was fearful, and then he steps out of the room, apparently upset. Mauricio, he's suing, my understanding, based on the reporting for a number of causes of action. Here, sexual battery, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Does that apply to these circumstances? Everything I've described so far. Yeah, listen, intentional infliction of emotional distress, based on what he's describing here, is completely a count that could survive. Everything that he's saying is the type of thing that it could be defended, but it's definitely something that Sean Combs has to worry about, civil. And they also sued his companies. So it's not only him, it's Bad Boy Records, and it's a couple of other companies that under Sean Combs' control. The allegations, especially the ones that include violence, are pretty alarming. If I was cross-examining this guy at the end of the day, he admits that, he penetrated this woman, and if you penetrate somebody, there's an issue of, were you aroused or not? Are you forced or not? Did you wanna or not? And when a man penetrates a woman, the argument is, and I'm sure this is gonna come up in trial or in deposition, you wanted to do it at least at some level. You were wrecked, and you penetrated her so well. The other way is look, the other way of flipping the narrative is like, look who I'm around, look what I'm witnessing, look what he's doing. And you mentioned it before. Pines also alleges that he actually witnessed Combs kick a guest during a birthday celebration in Turks and Chaos. Combs didn't tell anybody he had COVID, actually gave another person COVID, and Pines was instructed to keep quiet again. We're talking about Sean Combs,
present,
not in
and no longer
2024,
has a
but
voice
Sean
who will
Combs,
pursue justice
years
for
ago,
her
but
accusation.
at the height of his
As of the
power,
taken
wealth,
against
and
Diddy.
fame.
No
That is
expansion of the
something that is a
investigation,
common
no
theme
isolation
throughout all
orders,
these cases.
no equipment
And one of
access,
the reasons
no
why you
suspension of
have
attorney
seen
communication.
number of these lawsuits
Everything
come
inside
out after
solitary
Sean
Block
Combs
C continued
was
as
either,
before. Everything
indicted
except
or
the fear.
arrested. And
If a female
particularly
warden
after
can
his
vanish
bail
after a
was
single
denied,
note,
I think that
except
was a
the
big
fear.
concept too,
If a
is that
female
he
warden
no
can
longer,
vanish after a single
can
note,
attack
ones
you,
who
and he
once
can no
worked
longer,
overnight in that
be a
area,
threat to you.
the ones
That
who
at least
filed
is
for
the
leave without
allegation,
giving a reason,
put
the ones who
forward.
saw but
And one
never
of the
spoke.
reasonings
No one
that's
mentions the
been put
note,
forward by
but
a
everyone
number of
knows
his
it appeared.
accusers.
And if
by
what
the
it
way,
says
let me
is
just
true,
go
then
back to
punishment.
this. So,
Part
while
3.
Diddy, of course,
The
is
person
at
no
the
longer
center
in the
of these
system. The internal
allegations,
personnel
as
database of
Mauricio
the
said in
Atlanta
this
Federal
lawsuit
Detention
that
Center
was reviewed
updated its
by
weekly
Rolling
roster.
Stone. He's
Under the
named
category
Combs
Special Personnel
Enterprises,
Code
Bad
Adjustment,
Boy
the name
Entertainment,
of Warden
and a
TD was
senior
marked as
employee named
removed from
Christina
system by
Perot.
administrative
Now,
order.
Perot
There was no
mentioned
decision
in a
number
filing
recorded,
by
but
music
was
producer
deactivated.
Rodney
Her
Jones.
personal
I wanna
contact
talk
information
about that for a
disappeared from
second
the
here
internal
because
network
Christina
exactly
Perot is
36
allegedly
hours
Schloss
after she
Combs'
filed her complaint.
right-hand woman.
The changelog
She's
was
even been
executed
described
from the
as a sort
system's
of
highest
Ghislaine
access level
Maxwell-type
server,
figure
a
to
device
Combs.
bearing the
And we
identifier
know, of course, that
DCCA1,
Maxwell is the
located
woman
in the
who is
coordination
convicted of
office on the 4th
trafficking
floor of the
young
Security
girls
Administration
in
Wing.
behalf of her boss.
Only
Jeffrey
2
Epstein
individuals
or her
possess the
boyfriend,
authority
her
to perform
accomplice,
a system-level
whatever you wanna
personnel
call him.
removal at that
Now,
tier,
according to a
the head of
complaint
Federal
that
Human
we've
Resources
talked
and
about
Detention
here before
Center.
this was filed
No
by Rodney
confirmation
Jones
exists
as
as
the
patient
chief
was
of
made.
staff.
The removal
Defendant
of Warden
was
TD's name was
instrumental
not
in
accompanied by
organizing
any
and executing
or protective
the RICO and
reassignment.
TVPA
At
enterprises.
11:20 a.m.,
That's
a
the
printed
sex
copy
traffic
of the personnel
enterprises.
deployment
And of
chart was
course,
generated
we
in
can't
preparation
be
for the
totally
new
sure
week's
what her
schedule.
alleged role is
Under
in
the
these
section
wild
marked
king
Internal
nights.
Alert,
But that is
TD's
just
name
some background, a little bit on Miss Karom, And Mauricio, I want to circle back with you on this because I do wonder, Combs is the only one being charged right now. The government's been a little bit shy about whether or not there's going to be a superseding indictment. Why do you think there hasn't been additional charges? Do you think there would be charges against additional other people after Sean Combs' trial in May? Or do you think that there's a situation where people are going to be cooperating with the government and testifying against it? I think it's a latter. I think people are going to be cooperating with the government, testifying against them. I see it all the time in regular cases. I don't see why that would change in a case of this magnitude, and I believe that people around him must have been complicit. I think that he felt that he was above the law. This is somebody that got Obama to pardon one of his best friends that was in prison for drugs. This is somebody that actually thought that he was above the law. So I can only, think that, he was sloppy in the way that he did these crimes, that there's probably a trail of evidence not only involving him, but everybody in his circle that he would, delegate these responsibilities to, and those people when they're faced with the reality of, hey, do you want to testify or do you want to, possibly do time? I think we're going to see a lot of people testifying against them. And it's not that just even a power dynamic between an employer and employee. It's the power dynamic between C Combs as your employer and you as the employee. I think that's going to be a big theme, as I mentioned before. Now, as for Sean Combs, we mentioned he's facing
will leave you
federal
speechless.
charges
When the
of
first images from the federal
and
raid on
sex
Diddy's $40
trafficking.
million
He's
Los
pleading
Angeles estate
not
were
guilty
released,
to
no
these
one expected
charges.
this.
He's
Neatly
presumed
stacked in
innocent
display
until
cabinets like
proven
prized
guilty,
possessions were
but
200 bottles of
attorneys
baby oil.
denied
Right
these
next to them,
allegations
over
in this
900
lawsuit,
bottles of
saying
lubricant.
in a
Rows and
statement
rows.
to
It
Rolling
looked less
Stone
like a
magazine,
home and more
no
like a
matter how
warehouse
many
for something
lawsuits
far
are
more
filed,
disturbing.
it won't
These weren't the
change the
kind of
fact
items
that
most people
Mr.
keep in
Combs
bulk. But
has
for
never
investigators,
sexually
it painted a
assaulted
chilling
or
picture.
sex
Why would
trafficked
one of the
anyone,
most powerful
man
men
or
in hip-hop
woman,
need this
adult
much?
or minor.
And more
We
importantly,
live in a
what
world
exactly were they
anyone can
used for?
file a lawsuit for any
It
reason.
started with a
Fortunately,
knock,
a fair
then a
and
battering
impartial
ram.
judicial
On a quiet
process
morning in March
exists
2024,
to find
Homeland
the
Security
truth,
agents
and
stormed Sean
Mr.
Diddy Combs'
Combs
LA
is
mansion in the
confident
elite neighborhood
he
of
will
Palm Beach
prevail
Hills.
in court.
Not long
Real
after,
quick,
another
Mars,
team hit his
before we
Miami
wrap this
property
up,
on the glitzy
he
Star
is right.
Island.
He is an
These weren't
innocent
just casual
until
searches,
proven
these were
guilty. If
federal
he is
raids with
acquitted
helicopters
in his
overhead,
criminal trial,
agents
what
in full
happens to
tactical
the other
gear, and
lawsuits?
entire blocks
You
on
think they still
lockdown.
go
What were they
forward?
looking for?
Yeah,
That
they go
question didn't
forward.
stay unanswered for long.
You're dealing with
Inside the
a
sprawling
different
17,000
bar
square foot
regarding,
mansion,
whether
agents
it's
uncovered a
reasonable
scene that
doubt
left even
or
seasoned
preponderance
investigators
of
allegedly
the
plan
evidence.
and
You could be
control the sex
found in,
performance series, which
not
we call
guilty of
Freak
a
Ops.
criminal case,
And
but
the
they
often
could have,
electronically recorded
more than
testimony.
enough
A
evidence
few
to
bottles.
convict
We're
you
talking hundreds.
in a
It
civil
looked less
trial.
like a
These civil guys are looking for money. They're not going to stop no matter what, even if he's acquitted or not. It's a completely different threshold, and I don't see them stopping until they actually, get money from him, which is what they want. But do you think that these planes, who, as I mentioned, it seems that they came forward, particularly after Combs was arrested, and now he's been denied bail if he is acquitted, and he is released. Do you think that they'll still want to go after him?
Well, listen, I think so because their name's already in the media. They've already started, this fight. That means if he's out and you're fearful of, retribution, you're still on his hit list. No matter what, just because you started, might as well finish it and might as well try and get your money. These lawsuits cost money. So the lawyers are going to be, on the hook for everything that they put forward regarding cost. So they're going to want to generate revenue from these lawsuits. So I don't think they're going to stop until they get money. All right. Mauricio Pilla, good seeing you. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks, man. Thanks so much. All right, everybody. That's all we have for you right now. Here on Sidebar, thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.